The emergency landing had been brutal, but I was alive, which seemed like a miracle given the state of my ship. The navigation console was a smoking ruin. The hull had been punctured in at least 3 places, and the communication array was scattered across half a kilometer of alien terrain. I had been lucky to find the small cave where I'd spent the last 3 days, watching unfamiliar stars wheel overhead at night while rationing the pitiful emergency supplies I'd managed to salvage. Liam Cortez, veteran transport pilot and occasional reconnaissance scout, stranded on a frontier world that wasn't even properly mapped yet. Not exactly how I had planned to end my career. The planet, Xylos, according to my damaged star charts, was beautiful in a primal, untamed way. Forests of towering vegetation with spiral-shaped purple leaves stretched across rolling hills. Crystal formations erupted from the ground at odd intervals, catching the light of the twin suns and fracturing it into kaleidoscopic patterns. But beauty could be deadly. I'd already encountered predators with too many limbs and eyes that tracked me with unnerving intelligence. The weather was even worse. Magnetic dust storms that could fry any remaining electronics, and nights so cold that frost formed inside my shelter despite the thermal blanket. I was down to my last ration pack when I saw them for the first time. They moved through the forest with a confidence I instantly envied, their powerful forms blending with the shadows despite their size. The Kthar. I had heard stories from frontier traders, a race of beast folk with thick fur, enhanced senses, and a tribal culture based on strength and ritual. Semi-nomadic clans that fought fiercely over territory but were said to have complex honor codes that dated back centuries. I watched them from a distance, both fascinated and terrified. They were at least a head taller than me, with powerful builds covered in fur ranging from deep russet to stormy gray. Their faces had feline features, with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the gathering dusk. They carried weapons that blended primitive design with advanced materials, spears with tips that gleamed too brightly to be simple metal, bows with strange crystalline components. I should have been more careful, should have remembered that predators have keener senses than prey. But hunger and desperation drove me toward their hunting grounds, hoping to scavenge something, anything, that might keep me alive another day. The trap was so well concealed that I never saw it before I was hoisted upside down, my ankle caught in a snare that had me dangling helplessly when they found me. 3 Kthar hunters, their expressions somewhere between amusement and outrage, spoke in rumbling, growling voices. My translation device was damaged like everything else, catching only fragments. Trespasser, sacred grounds. During Carthal Moon, I tried to speak, to explain, but the tallest one simply cut the rope, letting me crash to the ground before they bound my hand with efficient movements and marched me toward their encampment. The Kthar settlement was larger than I expected, dozens of hide tents arranged in concentric circles around a central fire pit. Warriors and hunters moved about with purpose, while younger Kthar trained with weapons in a designated area. Their technology level was deceptive. I glimpsed sophisticated metallurgy alongside primitive decorations, suggesting a culture that adopted what served them while maintaining traditions. My appearance caused an immediate stir. Children with fluffy, spotted fur scampered away, while adults watched with suspicious eyes. I was brought before an elderly Kthar whose silver-streaked fur and elaborate decorations marked him as important. The clan chief, I guessed. The hunter spoke rapidly, gesturing to me and then toward the distant hills. The chief studied me with eyes that seemed ancient and calculating. Finally, he spoke, and my translator managed to catch most of it. Human trespassed on sacred hunting grounds. During ritual moon phase, old laws clear. Value must be proven or life is forfeit. The finality in his tone made my blood run cold. But rather than immediate execution, what followed was unexpected. As our ways demand, the chief continued, the intruder becomes a prize. Those who wish to claim may challenge for the right. I was being offered as a prize in some kind of combat. Before I could process this bizarre turn of events, warriors began to step forward, eyeing me like an unusual trophy. Some seemed eager, others contemptuous. A massive male with battle scars crisscrossing his dark fur was the first to formally announce his challenge, his voice a thunderous rumble that needed no translation. I was dragged to a circular clearing at the edge of the encampment. A makeshift arena had been established, marked with totems and colored sand. The gathered Kthar formed a ring around it there, excited chatter creating a wall of sound. The first challenger was preparing, stretching powerful limbs when I saw her. She stood apart from the others, taller than many of the males. Her fur was deep amber with darker striations, like sunlight through autumn leaves. Unlike the decorated warriors, she wore minimal ornaments, just functional leather armor and a single crystal pendant. What caught my attention were her eyes, a fierce gold that seemed to assess everything with penetrating intelligence. Scars marked her exposed skin, telling stories of battles survived and won. She watched the proceedings with an unreadable expression until the chief announced the first combat. Two warriors entered the arena, the scarred male who had claimed first challenge and another, younger fighter with eager eyes. What followed was brutality disguised as ritual. They fought with controlled ferocity, combining strength, speed, and techniques that reminded me of Earth martial arts, but with a primal energy unique to the Kthar. No weapons, just claws, fangs, and raw physical power. The scarred warrior was prevailing, his experience obvious as he drove his younger opponent to the edge of the circle. That's when she moved. She stepped into the arena with such casual confidence that both fighters paused. She spoke, her voice low and resonant, with an authority that silenced the crowd. My translator caught fragments. Vrek, your claim is weak. I challenge. The human is valuable. The crowd's reaction told me this was unusual. Whispers rippled through the gathering. The scarred warrior, Vrek, snarled what seemed to be a protest, but the chief made a cutting gesture that ended the debate. Kyra challenges, the chief stated simply. Her right by clan law. The younger fighter immediately backed away, bowing his head to Kyra with what looked like respect tinged with fear. Vrek, however, puffed up his chest and circled Kyra, teeth bared in what might have been a smile or a threat. The runt lover wants the strange creature, he growled, my translator struggling with his dialect. Does Kyra think it will make her stronger to own something so weak? Kyra didn't respond verbally. She simply moved. I had thought the previous fighting was impressive, but Kyra's combat style was something else entirely. Where Vrek relied on overwhelming power, she used precise, economical movements. She ducked under his first charge, landed 3 rapid strikes to his side, and was already moving as he spun to catch her. She seemed to anticipate his every move, using his momentum against him, striking vulnerable points with devastating accuracy. Vrek grew increasingly frustrated, his attacks becoming wilder while Kyra remained coolly efficient. When she finally took him down, it was with a complex maneuver that ended with Vrek face down, Kyra's knee in his back, and her hand positioned to strike a killing blow to the base of his skull. She held the position until Vrek growled something that sounded like submission. Only then did she rise, not even breathing hard, while Vrek staggered to his feet, fury and humiliation evident in every line of his body. The chief raised his staff. Kyra claims the human. By combat, it is done. The crowd dispersed. The entertainment concluded. Kyra approached me directly, those golden eyes studying me with an intensity that made me want to shrink away. She grabbed the rope binding my wrists and pulled me after her toward a tent at the edge of the settlement. Inside, the space was simple but surprisingly comfortable. Furs covered the ground. A small fire pit glowed in the center, and weapons and tools were arranged with meticulous care. Kyra pushed me down onto a pile of furs, then tested my bonds before stepping back. She worked with my damaged translator for a few moments, adjusting something, then spoke carefully. You? Warm bed tonight. She pointed to the furs, then to herself, and made a gesture that unmistakably indicated shared space. The implication hit me like a physical blow. I shook my head, trying to convey my protest, my confusion, my fear. No, I don't, you can't, I stammered. Kyra's expression didn't change. She simply pointed outside, where the temperature was already dropping as night fell, then back to the furs, then to herself. Warm. Bed. She loosened my bonds slightly, then turned away to tend to her weapons, clearly considering the matter settled. I sat frozen, terrified and bewildered, uncertain what strange alien custom I had become entangled in, and what nightmare awaited me in the coming darkness. The temperature plummeted as night descended. I could see my breath inside Kyra's tent despite the small fire she maintained in the central pit. Outside, the wind howled with increasing ferocity, carrying ice crystals that rattled against the hide walls of our shelter. Kyra moved about the tent with the easy confidence of routine, checking supplies, arranging weapons, occasionally glancing at me though to ensure I hadn't tried anything foolish. I remained where she'd left me, partly from fear, partly because I had nowhere to go in the alien wilderness. When she finally approached me again, I tensed. She carried more furs in her arms, which she tossed beside me before kneeling to examine my restraints. "Cold night," she said, her words slightly clearer as she adjusted the translator. "Die alone. Need warmth." I blinked, suddenly understanding. The nights on Xylos were lethal. I'd nearly frozen in my cave despite my thermal gear. The Kthar, for all their fur, apparently shared body heat to survive the worst of the cold. "You just want me to help stay warm?" I asked cautiously. Kyra tilted her head, considering my words. "Yes, warm." She made a gesture encompassing both of us, then the sleeping furs. "Mine now. Keep alive." The relief was immediate, though complicated by a new understanding. I wasn't being threatened with something worse than death. I was being kept alive as a possession. Property. The thought burned, but it was better than the alternative my panicked mind had conjured. She removed my restraints, but fixed me with a stern look that needed no translation. "Don't try anything." I nodded, rubbing my wrists. "I understand." Kyra grunted acknowledgement, then set about arranging the sleeping area, layering furs on the ground, placing others ready to be pulled over us. I watched her movements, noting the efficient economy in everything she did. Despite her fearsome appearance, there was something almost graceful about her. When the fire had burned low and the cold had become truly biting, Kyra gestured imperiously to the sleeping furs. I hesitated only briefly before complying. What choice did I have? She extinguished all but the smallest flame in the fire pit, then joined me, pulling the topmost furs over us both. The awkwardness was excruciating. I lay rigid at the edge of the shared space, hyper-aware of her presence, the alien scent of her fur, the heat radiating from her larger form, the soft sound of her breathing. She seemed equally careful to maintain a small space between us, though as the night deepened and the temperature dropped further, that space inevitably closed. I woke sometime in the deepest part of night to find myself pressed against her back, my body instinctively seeking heat. I froze, but Kyra didn't stir, either deep in sleep or choosing to ignore the contact. In the dim light from the bank coals, I studied her more closely. The fur on her back was interrupted by scars, some old and faded, others still pink with healing. One particularly vicious mark curved from her shoulder blade down across her ribs. She'd seen combat, real combat, not just ritual duels. I wondered what battle she had fought, what world she had seen. Morning brought uncomfortable awareness and hasty separation. Kyra arose before dawn, rekindling the fire and preparing what appeared to be a morning meal, strips of some dried meat and a bitter, invigorating tea. She pushed a portion toward me without comment. Days fell into a pattern. Kyra would leave each morning to hunt or train or attend to clan business. I remained in her tent, initially under guard by a younger Kthar warrior who watched me with undisguised curiosity. I spent my time trying to repair my translator, studying what I could see of Kthar life from my limited vantage point, and contemplating escape plans that seemed increasingly pointless given the harsh environment. Nights were complicated. The bitter cold forced proximity that neither of us seemed entirely comfortable with, yet grew more familiar with each passing day. Sometimes, in the quiet darkness, Kyra would speak brief phrases, words I couldn't fully understand about hunting or clan politics or the weather patterns. I began to recognize certain terms, slowly building a rudimentary vocabulary. After a week, my translator finally cooperated enough to provide better two-way communication. The next evening, when Kyra returned from hunting, I attempted actual conversation. "Thank you," I said carefully, "for not killing me." Kyra looked up from cleaning her hunting knife, surprise evident in her expression. "Your speaking device works better." "Yes," I agreed. "I've been trying to fix it." She nodded, returning to her task. After a moment, she added, "Killing you would be wasteful. You may have uses. Not exactly heartwarming, but pragmatic." I decided to push further. "My name is Liam Cortez." She considered this, then replied, "I am Kyra of the Fireclaw clan, daughter of Seren, hunter of the Third Circle." A formal introduction, I gathered. "Why did you claim me in the challenge?" I asked, the question that had been burning since that first day. Kyra's hands stilled on her knife. She studied me with those penetrating golden eyes. "Vrek would have broken you in a day, then discarded you. Humans are rare here. You might know things. Useful things. So, I'm, what? A resource to be exploited?" Her head tilted. "Are you not alive? Fed? Protected?" I couldn't argue with that, though I wanted to. Where I come from, people aren't possessions. Where I come from, strangers who trespass on sacred grounds during Carthal Moon are not given chances to prove worth. Her tone was matter of fact, not unkind but firm. "You live because I claimed you. You are safe because others know you are mine." I wanted to argue further, to assert my independence, my dignity, my humanity. But the simple truth was that she had saved me from certain death, twice over. Once from execution for my unwitting trespass, and daily from the lethal environment of Xylos. That night, the temperature dropped to record lows as a freezing storm battered the encampment. The cold was so intense that frost formed on the inside of the tent despite the fire. Without a word, Kyra pulled me closer beneath the furs, her body heat the only thing standing between me and hypothermia. I didn't resist. As we lay there in the darkness, listening to the howling wind, she spoke again, her voice softer than I'd heard before. "Your ship, it cannot be fixed." "No," I replied, surprised by the question. "Too much damage. And even if I could repair it, there's no fuel." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then Xylos is your home now. You should learn our ways." The words settled over me like the heavy furs, a weight that was both burden and protection. "Why would you help me learn?" In the darkness, I felt rather than saw her shrug. "A dull knife is useless. A broken spear is discarded. If you are to be mine, you should be of value." Not exactly a declaration of friendship, but it was something, a beginning. In the morning, rather than leaving me in the tent, Kyra gestured for me to follow her. Under the curious gazes of the clan, I trailed after her as she went about her duties. She began, haltingly at first, to explain what I was seeing, the hierarchy of hunters and warriors, the significance of certain decorations, the responsibilities of different clan members. I attracted stares, whispers, occasional hostile growls. Children followed at a distance, giggling when I looked their way. One bold youngster came close enough to sniff at me before darting away, causing raucous laughter among his peers. Kyra largely ignored these reactions, though occasionally she would fix someone with a stare that immediately silenced derision. Her status in the clan was evidently high enough to protect me from outright harassment, if not from curiosity. In the days that followed, she began to teach me rudimentary survival skills. How to identify edible plants, how to move quietly through the forest, how to recognize the signs of approaching predators or weather events. I was a poor student by Cthar standards, with my dull senses and physical weakness, but Kyra was surprisingly patient, repeating lessons and adapting techniques to my limitations. It was during one of these lessons that I first encountered Rorik. We were practicing a method of setting small snares when a shadow fell across us. I looked up to see a Cthar male with russet fur and a sneer that needed no translation. He spoke to Kyra in their language, too rapidly for my translator to catch, but the contemptuous glance he threw my way made his sentiment clear enough. Kyra responded without looking up from the snare she was demonstrating, her tone dismissive. This seemed to anger Rorik, who stepped closer, looming over me. "The human pet learns to hunt," he asked in broken trade language, deliberately bypassing my translator. "Perhaps it should learn to fight first. Or is it only good for warming your bed, Kyra?" I felt heat rise in my face, anger and humiliation warring for dominance. Before I could respond, Kyra was on her feet, her movements so fluid I barely registered it until she stood between me and Rorik. "The human is mine to train as I see fit," she said coolly. "Your opinion is neither sought nor valued, Rorik." Rorik's lip curled, revealing sharp canines. "The clan whispers, Kyra. They say you grow soft, keeping a weakling instead of a proper mate. Perhaps your position should be reconsidered." Kyra didn't respond with words. Her posture shifted subtly, a coiling of potential energy that made Rorik step back despite his bravado. "Challenge if you dare," she said quietly. "Until then, the human remains mine, and your interference will be treated as theft." Rorik snarled something untranslatable, cast another contemptuous look at me, and stalked away. I looked at Kyra, who had already returned to the snare demonstration as though nothing had happened. "What was that about?" "Rorik covets my position," she replied matter-of-factly. "He believes association with you weakens me." "Does it?" I asked, genuinely curious about Cthar politics. Kyra considered me for a moment. "That depends on what you prove to be. Currently, you are an unknown quantity. A curiosity, a potential tool or liability." She demonstrated the final knot in the snare. "You should work to be the former rather than the latter." It was the closest thing to advice she'd given me, and I took it to heart. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into learning everything I could, not just survival skills, but Cthar customs, language, history. I paid attention to clan dynamics, noting who deferred to whom, who challenged, who mediated. I also began to contribute in small ways. I repaired tools using techniques from my engineering training. I helped predict weather patterns based on atmospheric readings that my remaining equipment could detect. I even assisted the clan healer after I recognized similarities between a local plant and a medicinal herb from another colony world. Each small success earned me incremental acceptance, not as an equal, but as something more than just Kyra's human. Children no longer ran from me, but peppered me with questions about human worlds. Some hunters began to acknowledge me with nods rather than stares. Kyra watched it all with those inscrutable golden eyes, occasionally offering a curt nod of approval when I particularly impressed her. Our nights remained a strange blend of necessity and growing familiarity. Sometimes, in the liminal space between waking and sleep, we would talk, careful, measured conversations about our respective worlds. She told me of Cthar traditions, of her mother's legendary hunts, of her own rise to prominence as a warrior who relied on skill and strategy rather than brute strength. I shared stories of human colonies, of space travel, of the vastly different cultures across settled worlds. "Your people have no clans?" she asked once, sounding genuinely puzzled. "We have families, nations, affinity groups," I explained, "but not exactly clans like yours." "Then who protects you? Who ensures your place?" I struggled to explain concepts like individual rights, self-determination, social contracts. Kyra listened with what seemed like skeptical fascination. "Your way seems lonely," she finally said. "Each human standing apart, claiming to need no one while secretly needing everyone." I was struck by the insight. "Maybe," I admitted, "but we value freedom." "Freedom to freeze alone in the night," she countered, pulling the furs more securely around us as the temperature dropped. "Freedom to starve when you cannot hunt? What use is such freedom?" I had no ready answer. As the local season changed, bringing even harsher weather, the clan prepared to move to winter hunting grounds in a more sheltered valley. The preparations revealed tensions I hadn't fully appreciated before. Resources were tight, with recent hunts less successful than hoped. There were whispered concerns about territorial conflicts with neighboring clans whose own hunting grounds had been disrupted by something. Rorik's faction grew more vocal in their criticism of the current leadership, including Kyra. I caught snippets of arguments suggesting more aggressive approaches to neighboring territories, less adherence to traditional boundaries, more opportunistic raiding. Kyra seemed increasingly preoccupied, returning to our tent later each night, often with new cuts or bruises from training sessions that seemed more like actual combat. She spoke less, the weight of responsibility evident in the set of her shoulders. One night, as a particularly severe storm raged outside, I finally asked directly, "What's happening, Kyra?" "Something's wrong with the clan." She was silent so long I thought she might not answer. Finally, she sighed, a surprisingly human sound. "The Azure Fawn clan has expanded into territories not traditionally theirs," she explained. "They pushed the Silver Claw to the west, who pushed the Night Hunters to the south, who now encroach on our winter grounds." "Why the expansion? Has something changed?" Kyra nodded grimly. "Something affects the northern territories. Game herds move strangely. Hunting grounds once rich now stand empty. Some speak of strange machines seen at the edge of the crystal wastes, others of unfamiliar ships in the night sky." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. "Ships? What kind of ships?" "I have not seen them myself," Kyra admitted, "but the descriptions match no clan vessel I know." My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Mining corporations were known to establish outposts on frontier worlds with little regard for indigenous life. Military interests sometimes tested weapons in remote areas. Pirates occasionally used uninhabited planets as bases. "I could help," I offered suddenly. "If there are human enterprises involved, I might understand their purposes, their weaknesses." Kyra studied me with that penetrating gaze. "Why would you help the clan?" It was a fair question. I consider my answer carefully. "Because whatever disrupts your hunting grounds threatens my survival." 2. "Because..." I hesitated, then admitted, "because you saved my life, and I pay my debts." Something shifted in her expression, a subtle softening around the eyes, perhaps. She nodded once, accepting my reasoning. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will speak with the clan council." The council meeting was held in the largest tent, with representatives of the major family groups present. I stood behind Kyra, acutely aware of being the only human in a gathering of Cthar elders and warriors. The chief presided, his silver-streaked fur gleaming in the firelight. Kyra presented me formally, explaining my offer of assistance. I was surprised when she emphasized my knowledge of technology and human customs as valuable assets, speaking of my contributions to the clan with what almost sounded like pride. The reaction was mixed. Some elders nodded thoughtfully, while others growled skepticism. Rorik, present as a representative of younger warriors, made no attempt to hide his contempt. "We should strengthen our warriors, not rely on alien weaklings," he argued. "The traditional way is clear. We fight for what is ours." "Fighting blindly is a fool's path," Kyra countered. "The human offers knowledge we lack." The debate continued, growing heated, until the chief raised his staff for silence. "Kyra's human may accompany the scouting party to the northern territories," he declared. "Let his knowledge be tested. If he proves useful, we will consider his counsel further." It was a compromise, but a significant one. For the first time, I would be leaving the immediate vicinity of the clan encampment, entrusted with a critical mission. As we left the council tent, Rorik blocked our path, his expression thunderous. "When your pet gets warriors killed with bad counsel," he growled at Kyra, "I will personally challenge for leadership of the hunt." Kyra met his gaze calmly. "When the scouting mission succeeds, perhaps you should reconsider your understanding of strength, Rorik." His snarl followed us back to our tent. That night, as we prepared our gear for the journey, Kyra handed me something unexpected. A knife, small by Cthar standards but perfectly sized for my hand, with a blade of the same strange, gleaming material I'd noticed in their weapons before. "For protection," she said simply. I tested its weight, surprised by its perfect balance. "Thank you." She nodded, then added, Try not to get yourself killed. It would reflect poorly on my judgment. I laughed. A genuine laugh, the first and longer than I could remember. After a startled moment, Kyra's lips curled in what might have been the ghost of a smile. The scouting party departed before dawn. Kyra, myself, and 3 other warriors chosen for their tracking skills and discretion. We traveled swiftly through forests that grew progressively stranger as we moved north. Vegetation with metallic qualities, crystal formations that seemed to pulse with inner light, evidence of animals I hadn't encountered before. 4 or 5 days we moved deeper into unfamiliar territory, finding troubling signs. Game trails showed unusual patterns, with herds moving erratically rather than following seasonal migrations. We discovered a stream where the water had developed an oily sheen and smelled faintly of chemicals. Most concerning were the areas of forest that had been cleared with brutal efficiency, trees not cut but seemingly dissolved, leaving perfect circular clearings with scorched earth. On the 6th day, we found the source. From our concealed position on a ridgeline, we observed a valley that had been transformed. Prefabricated structures, standard corporate mining units, I recognized with a sinking feeling, had been established around what appeared to be boring equipment. Automated harvesters moved through the remaining forest at the perimeter, systematically removing vegetation. Waste material was being pumped into a nearby ravine, explaining the contaminated water we'd found. Miners, I explained quietly to Kyra. They're extracting something, probably rare earth elements or xenon compounds, given the equipment they're using. They destroy the migration routes, one of the other scouts growled. The herds avoid the tainted water and strange machines. I nodded grimly. They probably don't even realize or care about the impact they're having on the ecosystem. These operations are typically automated or minimally staffed, programmed to maximize extraction with little oversight. Kyra's expression was cold fury. How do we stop them? I studied the facility, noting security measures, power systems, communication arrays. Corporate operations like this one typically had vulnerabilities, shortcuts taken to save costs, safety protocols ignored in the name of efficiency. We need more information, I decided. If I can access their systems, I might be able to determine who they are, what they're after, and how to disrupt their operation. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. The Kthar couldn't fight machines with spears and bows, no matter how enhanced their weapons might be. But with knowledge, with understanding of the weaknesses inherent in such operations, they might have a chance. We waited until nightfall before moving closer. The facility had minimal human presence, just a few supervisors, based on the living quarters I could identify. Most of the work was being done by drones and semi-autonomous equipment. I need to reach that building, I whispered to Kara, pointing to what appeared to be a control center. If I can access their network, I can learn everything we need to know. She studied the terrain between us and the target, then nodded once. We go together. I wanted to argue, to insist she stay with the others, but the determined set of her jaw told me it would be pointless. Instead, I focused on explaining the security measures I could identify and how to avoid them. Moving across the open ground was terrifying, but Kyra's presence beside me was oddly reassuring. She moved with silent grace, helping me stay in blind spots, freezing in my signal when sensors swept nearby. Together, we reached the control building undetected. The door required a keycard, but the ventilation system provided an alternative. Kyra boosted me up, her strength making it seem effortless, and I crawled through the narrow duct until I reached an access panel. Inside, the control room was deserted. Night shift operations were fully automated, with alarms set to alert the skeleton crew if anything required human attention. I moved quickly to the main console, plugging in a data tool I'd salvaged from my ship. "What are you doing?" Kyra whispered, keeping watch by the door. "Bypassing security, accessing their operational database," I muttered, fingers flying over the interface. "They don't expect physical infiltration. Their security is focused on external network protection." The information that flooded the screen confirmed my worst fears. Galactic Resource Extraction Corporation, one of the most notorious for exploiting frontier worlds. They had detected rare isotopes on Xylos and established this preliminary extraction facility without bothering with environmental surveys or indigenous population assessments. They're just the advanced team, I told Kyra grimly. If these initial extractions prove profitable, they'll bring in a full-scale operation. Hundreds of personnel, heavy machinery, orbital support. Kyra's expression darkened. That cannot happen. No, I agreed, downloading everything I could find. Operational schedules, equipment specifications, personnel rotations, communication protocols. It can't. We were almost finished when alarms suddenly blared. Not because of us. A drone had detected the other scouts on the ridge. Time to go, I said, grabbing the data tool and heading for the ventilation duct. Kyra was already moving, her reflexes faster than mine. We escaped the building but found the perimeter coming alive with security measures. Lights sweeping the grounds, drones deploying from charging stations. We ran for the tree line, keeping to shadows where possible, but freedom seemed impossibly distant. A drone spotted us 50 meters from safety, swinging around with a spotlight that pinned us in its glare. Before I could react, Kyra pushed me roughly aside and leaped an impossible distance, her powerful form connecting with the drone and bringing it crashing down. She rolled to her feet, fur bristling, as a security guard appeared from around a storage unit. He raised a stun weapon, aiming at Kyra. Without thinking, I threw myself forward, driving the Kthar knife Kyra had given me into the control panel on his wrist. The weapon shorted out, and the guard howled in pain as electrical feedback surged through the system. Kyra grabbed me, and we ran. Behind us, more alarms sounded, but we reached the trees before additional guards could mobilize. We reunited with the other scouts, who had already begun a strategic withdrawal, and moved swiftly through the darkened forest. It wasn't until we'd put several kilometers between ourselves and the facility that we paused to catch our breath. In the faint moonlight, Kyra looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You attacked the guard," she said, a question in her tone. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "He was going to shoot you. You put yourself at risk." "For me. We're a team," I said simply. "That's what teammates do." Something changed in her eyes then, a softening, a recognition. She reached out and briefly gripped my shoulder, her touch conveying what words couldn't. We made our way back to the clan encampment in forced marches, aware that the mining corporation might send pursuit once they realized their systems had been breached. The information I gathered was too valuable to risk losing. The clan council convened immediately upon our return. I presented what I discovered, explaining the threat in terms they could understand, not just to their winter hunting grounds, but to their entire way of life if GREC established a major presence on Xylos. "They have superior weapons," Rorik argued, predictably advocating for direct confrontation. "But we have superior warriors and knowledge of the land. A direct attack would be suicide," I countered, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "Their automated defenses would cut down dozens of warriors before you even reach the inner perimeter." The council chamber erupted in growls and competing voices. Kyra stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. "The human speaks truth," she said firmly. "I've seen these weapons. They kill without honor, without facing their prey. But," she looked at me, "there are other ways to fight, are there not?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, we don't have to defeat their weapons. We can defeat their purpose for being here." Using scavenged materials and improvised displays, I explained the concept of corporate cost-benefit analysis. How GREC would continue operations only if profits exceeded expenses. How delays, equipment failures, and communication disruptions could turn a profitable venture into a liability. "We make Xylos too costly," I concluded, "not by sacrificing warriors in direct attacks, but by becoming a constant, invisible thorn in their side. Eventually, their distant masters will decide this outpost isn't worth the trouble." The chief considered this strategy, his ancient eyes evaluating not just my words, but how his clan had responded to them. Finally, he nodded. "Kyra will lead this. Shadow War," he declared. "Those who wish to follow her path may do so." Rorik will prepare our defenses should direct conflict become necessary. It wasn't total victory, but it was enough. As the council dispersed, Rorik shouldered past me, contempt radiating from every line of his body. When your clever plan fails, he growled, and the metal machines come for our hunting grounds, remember that it was your weakness that doomed us. Kyra stepped between us, her stance protective, though her tone remained cool. When his plan succeeds, remember that strength takes many forms. Rorik. In the days that followed, we prepared. I worked with a small group of Kthar who had been chosen for their stealth and quick learning. Using the data I'd stolen and my technical knowledge, we developed strategies to disrupt GREC operations without directly engaging their security forces. We targeted supply lines, sabotaged environmental sensors, introduced subtle errors into their geological survey results. We created false readings of dangerous fauna, misdirected drones, and occasionally triggered perimeter alarms only to vanish before security could respond. It was exhausting, dangerous work. We operated primarily at night, in shifting weather conditions, always at risk of detection. More than once, we barely escaped automated security measures or drone patrols. A warrior named Thala suffered a severe burn from a security laser. Another, Krell, nearly fell into a caustic waste pond during a hasty retreat. Through it all, Kyra was a constant presence, leading from the front, taking the most dangerous assignments, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. I worked alongside her, my human limitations painfully apparent, but my technical knowledge proving invaluable. Our partnership deepened with each mission. No longer captor and captive, we became something closer to equals, each contributing unique skills to our shared goal. The nights in her tent transformed from awkward necessity to comfortable routine, our conversations flowing more freely, often stretching into the early hours as we planned our next moves. One night, after a particularly successful mission disrupting their communication array, Kyra returned to our tent with an unexpected trophy, a small portable computer from the facility's perimeter station. The guard was careless, she explained, placing it before me like a hunter presenting a prime kill. Can you use this? I examined it with growing excitement. This is better than I hoped. With this, I can monitor their internal communications, maybe even introduce false reports. I worked through the night, bypassing security measures, establishing covert access to their systems. Kyra watched with obvious fascination, asking occasional questions that revealed her quick intelligence. Your people rely too much on these machines, she observed as dawn approached. They trust what the glowing symbols tell them more than their own eyes and ears. That's their weakness, I agreed. And our advantage. She studied me then, her golden eyes reflecting the screen's blue light. You fight well, Liam. Not as a Kthar fights, but effectively nonetheless. Coming from her, it was high praise. I felt a surprising warmth spread through my chest. I had a good teacher, I replied. Something shifted in her. Expression, a softening I'd glimpsed only rarely before. She reached out, her clawed hand surprisingly gentle as she pushed a strand of hair from my face. Rest now, she said quietly. Tomorrow brings new battles. 3 weeks into our campaign, we began to see results. Equipment malfunctions plagued the mining operation. Supply shipments were delayed or lost entirely. Geological surveys kept returning contradictory results. Communications with corporate headquarters became increasingly frustrated. But GREC wasn't giving up easily. They increased security, brought in additional personnel, and expanded their perimeter defenses. They seemed determined to make the Xylos operation successful, regardless of setbacks. Our struggle reached a critical point when a larger transport ship arrived, carrying heavy excavation equipment and a full security detail. This was no longer just a preliminary operation. GREC was committing significant resources. They doubled their effort rather than retreat. Rorik announced triumphantly at an emergency council meeting. The human strategy fails. Now we must fight as warriors. Many voices rose in agreement. The clan had grown increasingly anxious as GREC expanded despite our efforts. I could see the tide turning against us. A direct assault would be massacre, I argued desperately. Their reinforcements include military-grade weaponry, which you have failed to defeat with your sneaking and hiding, Roar cut in. Perhaps it is time to see what Cthar courage can accomplish where human cowardice has failed. I felt my face flush with anger, but before I could respond, Kyra stepped forward. Liam has fought beside me through every mission, she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs. He has bled for our clan and risked his life repeatedly. Question his tactics, if you will, Rorik, but never question his courage. The council fell silent, surprised by her vehement defense. Even the chief raised his eyebrows, looking between Kyra and me with new consideration. The human has proven his worth, the chief acknowledged. But Rorik speaks truth as well. The strangers expand their territory despite our efforts. I thought frantically, searching for a solution that would prevent a suicidal frontal assault without abandoning our cause. There's another way, I said suddenly. Their main power generator. It's their central vulnerability, but it's too heavily guarded for small sabotage missions. Then we strike with our full strength, Rorik declared. No, I shook my head. We need a diversion, a convincing one that draws their security forces away just long enough for a small team to reach the generator core. If we can overload it, the resulting explosion will destroy most of their equipment without risking our warriors in direct combat. The plan took shape rapidly. Rorik, eager for action, would lead a visible force to threaten the facility's northern perimeter, making noise, triggering alarms, but staying beyond weapon range. Meanwhile, Kyra and I, along with two of our most experienced saboteurs, would approach from the south during the confusion, targeting the power core. It was desperately dangerous, balancing the need to create a convincing diversion without placing Rorik's warriors in direct fire. The timing had to be perfect, and even then, the margin for error was slim. The night of the attack arrived with ominous weather. Storm clouds gathering over the mountains, distant thunder rumbling like an echo of our intentions. We gathered at the edge of the forest, final preparations underway. Kyra and I checked our gear in silence, the weight of responsibility heavy between us. We'd come so far from captor and captive, hunter and prey. Now we were partners in a mission that would determine not just our fate, but that of her entire clan. If this fails, she said quietly, Rorik will lead the clan into open conflict. It won't fail, I replied with more confidence than I felt. She looked at me then, her golden eyes searching mine. If there was a way for you to return to your people, a ship, a signal, would you take it? The question caught me off guard. I don't know, I admitted. She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Then, in a gesture that startled me, she removed the crystal pendant she always wore, the only personal adornment she seemed to value, and placed it around my neck. For protection, she said, echoing her words from when she had given me the knife weeks ago. But there was something more in her voice now, something deeper. Before I could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against mine, a Cthar gesture I'd seen only between closest kin or battle-bonded warriors. Return to me, Liam, she whispered. Whatever else happens, return. My heart hammered in my chest, a sudden clarity washing over me. This place, this harsh, beautiful world, had become more than just my prison or refuge. And Kyra had become more than my captor or ally. I promised, and meant it with every fiber of my being. The mission began according to plan. Rorik's warriors created a spectacular diversion, lighting fires, triggering proximity sensors, making themselves visible enough to draw attention without exposing themselves to direct fire. Grek's security forces responded predictably, deploying drones and guards to the northern perimeter. Our small team approached from the south, using the sensor-blocking compounds we developed from local minerals. We reached the outer fence without detection, cut through with tools modified from my ship's remains, and slipped into the facility's maintenance area. The power core was housed in a reinforced building at the center of the complex. We navigated between patrol routes, ducking behind equipment, freezing in shadows as drones passed overhead. Every step was calculated every movement planned. We had almost reached the core building when everything went wrong. An unscheduled drone patrol rounded the corner directly in our path. It spotted us immediately, alarm lights flashing as it broadcasted our position. Within seconds, the facility's alert system activated, and security forces began converging from all directions. "Run!" Kyra shouted, pushing me toward the power core as she turned to face the approaching guards. Our two companions split off in different directions, creating multiple targets. I sprinted for the core building, knowing our entire plan depended on reaching it. Behind me, I heard the distinctive sound of stun weapons firing, a roar of pain that could only be Kyra. I reached the door, my hands shaking as I used the access codes we'd stolen. The door slid open, revealing the humming heart of Greg's operation. Banks of equipment surrounding a central reactor column. Working frantically, I connected the device we'd prepared, a crude but effective overload mechanism that would force the reactor into catastrophic failure. As I began the activation sequence, a voice from behind froze me in place. "Step away from the console." I turned slowly to find a security officer covering me with a lethal-setting pulse rifle. His uniform marked him as the head of facility security, and his expression promised no mercy. "Corporate saboteur?" he asked coldly. "We're just a local GON native. Either way, this ends now." My mind raced. The overload sequence needed final confirmation. Just a few more commands. I had to buy time. "You don't understand what you're doing here," I said, taking a careful step backward, closer to the console. "This planet has an indigenous population with rights recognized under Galactic Charter Section 27. He snorted. "Save it. Corporate has all the necessary authorizations." This mudball was classified uninhabited except for non-sentient fauna. A deliberate misclassification, I argued, my fingers inching toward the console behind me. The Kthar are fully sentient, with complex language, social structures, and technological development. "Not my department," he replied, adjusting his aim. "Now step away, or I put you down." I tensed, knowing I'd never reached the confirmation button before he fired. This was it. Failure. The Kthar would launch their doomed frontal assault, and Kyra's clan would be decimated. Suddenly, a blur of motion from above, Kyra dropping from an overhead maintenance shaft, landing on the security chief with devastating force. They went down in a tangle of limbs, the pulse rifle skittering across the floor. A lunge for the console, entering the final confirmation code. The system accepted it, warning lights immediately flashing as the overload began. "Facility critical failure imminent. Evacuate immediately," an automated voice announced. "Reactor overload in 10 minutes." Kyra pinned the security chief with one powerful arm, blood matting the fur on her shoulder where a stun blast had burned through. "We need to go," I urged, moving to help her. She delivered a precise blow to the man's temple, rendering him unconscious rather than killing him. "Can he escape the explosion?" she asked as we headed for the exit. "Yes," I confirmed. "The evacuation warning gives everyone time to clear the danger zone. The facility will be destroyed, but lives will be spared." She nodded approval as we raced through increasingly chaotic corridors. GREC personnel rushed toward emergency exits, too concerned with their own survival to bother with us. Alarms blared, emergency lights pulsed, and beneath it all, a growing vibration as the power core destabilized. We burst from the building, sprinting toward the perimeter fence. Behind us, the evacuation was in full swing. Personnel piling into transport vehicles, drones returning to carriers, automated systems shutting down as safety protocols engaged. We reached the Trilene just as the first explosion lit up the night, followed by secondary blasts as various systems failed catastrophically. From our position of safety, we watched Greg's operation disintegrate in spectacular fashion. Equipment melting, structures collapsing, years of potential environmental devastation averted in one decisive blow. Kyra stood beside me, her breathing heavy, blood still seeping from her wound. Despite the injury, her posture radiated triumph. "Now they will leave," she said with certainty. For a while at least, I agreed. The cost of rebuilding this facility, plus the lost equipment and delayed production. Corporate headquarters will pull the plug. She turned to me then, her expression unguarded in a way I'd never seen before. You fought well, Liam. As a true warrior of the Fire Claw. I reached up to touch the crystal pendant she had given me, still hanging around my neck. We fought well. Together. In the flickering light of the distant fires, with destruction behind us and an uncertain future ahead, Kyra did something completely unexpected. She smiled. A full, genuine smile that transformed her fierce features into something achingly beautiful. Together, she agreed softly. We returned to the clan as heroes, on a high ridge overlooking the clan's territory. Far below, campfires flickered like earthbound stars, marking the settlement that had become my home. My hand found hers, our fingers intertwining despite their differences. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Not trying to find a way back to your people? I considered the question seriously, as she deserved. I think about Earth sometimes, I admitted. Friends, family, the life I had there. But regret? No. I squeezed her hand gently. This is where I belong now. She nodded, satisfaction in her expression. Good, because the clan needs you. She paused, a rare smile playing at her lips. And I need you. I pulled her close, still marveling at how perfectly we fit together despite our differences. Well, I'm not going anywhere. After all, who would warm your bed on cold nights? Her laughter, still a rare and precious sound, echoed across the valley. In the gathering dusk, with the woman who had won me in a duel wrapped in my arms, I knew with absolute certainty that my crash landing on Xylos hadn't been disaster at all. It had been destiny,